Can you mark Councillor Van Popta and Councillor Victor absent for me, please? Yeah. So great. With the call the regular meeting of Township Council for the purposes of a public hearing to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular acknowledge our valued relationships with the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Matsqui First Nations. That I will ask Mr. Richardson to read the preamble, please.
A public hearing is a statutory requirement under Section 464 of the Local Government Act and must be held before third reading of a community plan, land use contract amendment bylaw, heritage designation bylaw, or heritage revitalization agreement bylaw. During a public hearing, Council acts in a quasi-judicial role for the purpose of allowing persons who believe their interest in property is affected by a bylaw, permit, or other matter to make representations to Council, either orally, by written submission, or to add comments to or elaborate upon correspondence that may have already been presented to Council concerning the bylaws. It is important to note that Council is not able to receive any additional information on the bylaws following the public hearing as dictated by case law. The hearing procedure involves an explanation from the Community Development Division on the purpose of the proposed bylaws and to hear from individuals regarding the bylaws. In order to ensure that all interested parties have a reasonable opportunity to be heard, speakers are requested to keep representations as brief and succinct as possible and no longer than 5 minutes in duration, excluding the time required for questions from Council. Speakers will be asked to state their name, neighborhood, and city for the record. And if referring to prepared remarks, to submit copies of these to the Township Clerk. Decorum must be always maintained. This includes refraining from applause, booing, or heckling. To assist with large numbers of speakers, individuals must advise the Township Clerk and sign the speakers list prior to the commencement of the public hearing. The names on the speakers list will be read out during the hearing. Individuals who have already addressed Council and wish to add further submissions will wait until the people that have not yet addressed Council have had an opportunity to speak. All submissions and speaker lists are considered part of the public record. Council members should not express their views nor debate the bylaws. However, they may question speakers to clarify particular points in their submissions. Council may consider third reading or third reading and final adoption at this meeting or at its next regular meeting. Thank you.
Great. With that, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion? Call the question on A1. That carries unanimously. Mr. Richardson, item B1.
Thank you, Worship. The subject will be Community Plan and Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan Amendment and rezoning applications pertaining to a proposed development consisting of 509 apartments and 5 6-story mixed-use buildings and 1 4-story residential building, 99 townhouses, and 10,000 square feet of commercial space. The 11.47 acre site is designated multifamily, neighborhood commercial, and residential in the Willoughby Community Plan, and single-family mixed residential townhouse, medium-density apartment, and medium-density mixed use in the Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan. This air photo depicts a site located at 68th Avenue east of 206th Street. Proposed Willoughby Community Plan and Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 6055 aligns the Willoughby Community Plan designation with the Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan multifamily designation, amends the maximum 1.9 floor space ratio in the medium-density apartment and medium-density mixed-use designations on a site-specific basis to permit up to a 2.02 floor space ratio, and also permits heights up to 6 stories in the medium-density apartment designation. Proposed rezoning bylaw 6056 amends the suburban residential SR2 zone to comprehensive development zones 206 and 207 to accommodate the proposed mixed-use development. The next series of slides are the site plan, renderings, elevations, as well as the landscape plan. As indicated in development permit 100286, Staff recommends support of Willoughby Community Plan and Northeast Gordon Plan Amendment Bylaw 6055 and rezoning Bylaw 6056, subject to 17 conditions listed on page 12 of Council's agenda. Your Worship, a total of 147 notices were mailed out, 8 written submissions have been received, and there's one individual noted on the speakers list, and that is Ron and Carrie Shore, Your Worship.
Great. Thanks. Ron and Carrie Shore, would you come forward? Yeah, please come forward if you wish. Certainly don't have to, but you signed up for the speakers list. But if you wish to make a submission, if you've made a written submission as well, then council has that. Go ahead.
We didn't write anything.
You didn't make a written submission? So
No.
great. So thanks for coming here tonight. Go ahead.
No, we're kind of opposed to this. So the area where we live on, we're on 206 and 66th Avenue. The parking around there, I've been there for 13 years now, and it's in a single townhouse complex. It's atrocious. It's horrible, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. You sometimes have to drive around the neighborhood for half an hour before you can find a spot, unless you're there before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But where the proposal for this stuff is, I mean, this is a big project, and I don't know where people are going to be parking, who are going to be coming there. Most families these days don't just have one vehicle; they have 2 and sometimes 3. And the way housing is going on in Vancouver, you know, kids have been forced to move back home, and so that's more vehicles. And then I've noticed in the last while, and excuse me, I grew up in Vancouver. I'm 60 years old. I moved out here when I was, 40. So Langley's starting to look like the east end of Vancouver where I grew up. It's becoming so mass developed that you're not getting that country feeling anymore. It's starting to feel like I'm in a big city. And then I'm starting to notice that the streets where people used to be able to park, you can no longer park there now. There's culverts made that's got shrubberies in there and plants and so on and so forth, where you could be parking before. You can't park there now because it's nice, but I think it's a lot of maintenance. It's taking away space for people to park up around that area. So my main concern is not so much the growth, which I think it's good that the city is growing, but I don't know where all these people are going to be able to park their vehicles, and the congestion that's going to be getting up in the Langley-Willoughby area. I mean, it's pretty congested right now. It's with this proposal, it's just, I don't know. It's just my feelings.
Great. I do have some questions from council. Councillor Kunst, go ahead.
Yeah.
We have a question for you, sir.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
just,
sorry.
you mentioned that you live pretty close in a, is it a townhouse
Yeah, there's
complex?
17 of them.
Okay, you don't have to tell me exactly where you live, but on which street and like just which block?
66 and 206.
Okay, thank you, that's all, thank you.
Great. I have one more, yes, sir. Yeah. Councillor Ferguson? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Shore, for coming. Yeah, I'm just trying to, we can't really see you, but I know the area quite well, even though I was born in East Vancouver.
Yes.
Anyway, and we still have, the family still has property there, and East Vancouver's changed too.
Big time.
But
yeah.
anyway, surrounding your area, if you look at, are there a lot of potential acreages or something in the area?
Well, you know what? It's funny you should say that, sir, because there was an area that was just up on 206, and I don't know what the cross street is there. Maybe it's 67?
6-7 is on.
It's a park. It's kind of like it was made into, which we were told because we phoned and asked why they took away made the street narrower there, took away all the parking. And it's something like a pond, and we were told it's like a runoff for higher up, but I don't ever see water coming in there, or it just looks like it's dormant land. To me, it looks like a waste, to tell you the truth, but I don't get it. But again, you build something like that in the middle of the area like that, now we're going to have something like this. It's kind of, I don't know. It just seems like to me, I'm retired now, and I have for a few years. I'm getting pushed further out, and I don't really want to do that, but I guess eventually, in order to live in a more of a country setting, which originally was why I moved out here, that's diminishing quickly.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, now there are no more other questions from
Okay.
council. Thank you very much
Thank you,
for
sir.
your submission. there any other submissions on item B1? Are there any other submissions from the public on item B1? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Reimer. I live on Ross Road in Abbotsford, and I'm with Langley Properties. Just to give a little bit of history with this site, we've owned it since 2006. We had made an application shortly after for single-family residences. We were asked by the township to reconsider and just wait, and there might be an opportunity for higher density. Probably around 2010, the township initiated a density review in a form of a design charrette for Northeast Gordon that we participated in. So the township had come together with the community and the neighbors over a period of probably 3 or 4 meetings and come up with a community plan that was seen earlier on the screen. So that's how we had come to this state where we're at. Also, the unit count that you see proposed was based on that community plan that was a units per acre. And we didn't even achieve the total number of units. And since then, council had decided to change that UPA to the FSR. So with that calculation, it puts us over our unit count. But according to the community plan that was adopted in 2013, I think it was, we are actually under our density. So that's why we're at where we are. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
Great, thank you.
Any questions?
No questions from council. Thank you. Is there any other submissions? Please come forward, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, my name's Ernie Kurtz. I live at 6711 206th Street. And I found time to, I guess, review the report that was submitted in support of this rezoning. And I think that I can stand here and say that I support that there's expansion in the area. But I do think that you should pay particular attention to the issue raised earlier by that gentleman, and that has to do with the parking. So that the density here, it's pretty heavy, I think, and at least 2 vehicles per unit. That gives you a sense of how much space you need for the parking. And if they don't park there, I'm kind of wondering where else they're going to park. So I think that I would speak in favor of the rezoning, but I think we need to pay attention to the density. And to me, it's pretty heavy, irrespective of the plan that you had in 2013. That's 10 years ago. People are living differently now. They have to live differently, and I think you have to pay attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other submissions from the public on item B1? Any other submissions from the public on item B1? And then please come forward, yeah.
Yeah, hi, good evening. My name's Laurie Taylor. I live on 20582 68th Avenue, so it's immediately adjacent to this property. Been there for 20 years, so there's been a lot of change over that time. The parking issue is huge. Every day there's problems with people not finding parking and getting into arguments with people. For myself, I mean, it's a single family home, so we just park on our driveway. But if we have any guests over or company, there's really no place for them to park. Sometimes they're parking blocks and blocks away, down by Costco and things like that. So the parking is a major issue. But another thing that hasn't been touched on is the schools. And we have grandchildren who have gone through the school system, and it's really inadequate. And the number of portables that, I mean, a school just gets built like Richard Bullpit, and within a couple of years, they're putting portables on the property. And the portables that they're putting in are really poor. Like, we had one of our grandchildren who, they didn't have heat during the wintertime. And that's, to me, that's just appalling. Like, it should not be. And that was at the RE Mountain Peter Ewart complex in there. So when we first saw this whole development plan, we thought, okay, yeah, you know, everything has to grow. But we're doing that on the basis of our elected officials really paying attention to what's going on, as opposed to crossing the I's, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and just sort of allowing development to take place. It's really important that with all this development, we just went for a walk on Sunday, and there's another major project up on 204th, I think it is, over 200 units that have been built. And when you walk through that area, you just think, where's everyone going to go? Because these haven't sold yet. I mean, these are in development and in the process. But they're going to have kids. They're going to have lots of people. And we're going to get into more and more problems. And the other thing that is happening is the amount of speeding that is going on the streets. This is, you know, just a residential area, and there doesn't seem to be very much control in that regard. And we're getting lots of automobiles, lots of noisy trucks, lots of motorcycles. It's just not a good thing. And I think, I would hope anyway, that council would just sort of take a step back on this and say, what's going on? Like, can that area really support what we're proposing here? Because from living there for 20 years, I don't think it can. It's just, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be really difficult for any kind of community at all. When you can't invite people over and even have them, you know, we have Thanksgiving coming this weekend. There's no way that we can have a Thanksgiving that we would used to, just because we know the neighborhood is going to be completely blocked as far as parking goes, and just common sense type things. And to be putting or proposing to put in 6 stories and commercial on the ground floor, like, it's a residential area. I don't get it. Like, it just seems way overbuilt. So please take that into consideration, all of those things, particularly the schools and the parking. Okay. Any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other submissions from the public on item B1? Of course.
But I grew up in Langley. I've been in Langley since I was 5 years old. Langley City by Blacklock. I grew up in that area. I moved to Willoughby here in 2013. We bought a townhouse. We still had teenagers at home at the time. We were able to walk all over the place. We were able to see wildlife, ducks, coyotes, everything. That's all gone. The parking, there is, like, I know he touched on the parking, so I won't go too much on that, but there is no parking. People not only have 2 vehicles in their houses, they've got kids that have moved home and have vehicles. They have people that are bringing all their work vehicles home. So a lot of the streets are their work vehicles, and then they've left their own vehicles in their garages. We live at 206 and 66. There's a stop sign there. We walk every night with our dogs, and I can tell you probably 9 out of 10 times people blow that stop sign, and it's just a matter of time before it's and I'm going fast. It's just so congested. Our malls doesn't support it. Like, our mall is still small. It's just so much. Like, in a 6th level building it's supposed to be like a country meets city is just, I don't know. I just don't support it at all. And that's just all I want to say.
I have a question for you. When
Okay.
you say your mall, which mall are you referring
Willowbrook
to?
Mall.
Willowbrook Mall.
Yeah, Willowbrook
Okay.
Mall. I mean, it's basically, I know it's got a few more stores in there, but it's pretty much the same since I was a young girl. It really hasn't grown, right? Our infrastructure, we keep building townhouses and apartments and places for people to live, but we're not accommodating roads or, I mean, the road by Costco, that's great. It's, you know, but it's gonna be basically like, it's gonna be pretty busy when it's done, but, you know, we're just not accommodating everything else. We're just, like the schools, like the other gentleman said, the schools, I would be horrified if I had little kids right now in school. Because I hear the horror stories of the portables and they're not heated and there's not enough room for kids and there's just not enough room for all this, right? So, okay,
Okay, thank you.
all right, thanks.
Any other submissions from the public on item B1? For a second time, any other submissions from the public on item B1? And then for a third and final time, are there any other submissions from the public on item B1? That'll close the public hearing for item B1. We've already heard from the proponent. So does anybody from council wish to move consideration of further reading? Is that moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rint? Call the question on consideration of third reading of B1. That carries unanimously. Does any wish to move the recommendation for third reading? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on B1? Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think, you know, I'm always torn because I think that when items are in the plan for an extended period of time, it's important to have some leeway for new feedback to come in. And so I'm sure that most of council would want to ponder on this for a couple more weeks. But I didn't want to just sort of have that happen without members of the public who have come tonight to not know that that's what was happening. So I think everybody at this table usually knows my stance on housing, but happy to delay it for a couple weeks.
What is your stance on housing?
I'm very, very, very adamant that we are in a housing crisis. Yeah. And as somebody who has battled that crisis for my entire life, I think I always look at projects like this as generally a good thing, but I understand that there are a lot of concerns that are valid, so I'm looking forward to taking 2 weeks to ponder those.
Great. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, thank you. Since we're going to be going close to a vote, if I may, a question to staff. How many parking spots are located in this development, Mr. Richardson?
Off the top of my head, through your worship to Councillor Ferguson, don't have an exact parking stall count there, but it is compliant with the zoning bylaw requirements.
So was it 1.5 per unit type of thing, or 2 per unit?
1.5 per unit for the apartments, depending on their size, and more than that for the townhouse component.
Mm-hmm. And also, it's a simple question, it's more of a housekeeping. It would be up to the developer, do they provide the plug-ins for the electrical vehicles as well, or that's up to the individual?
There's through your worship to Councillor Ferguson, there's a bylaw requirement for a proportionate amount of electric vehicle plug-ins or EV-ready plug-ins.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I guess my question would be, because we heard a lot about parking, with these new units, and clearly we haven't, there isn't enough parking, and maybe that's something that we could look at for this particular area, considering that it sounds like they're struggling over in these parts here, and with an added development, could we ask for additional parking, even for like visitor parking, so that when there is a celebration or a Thanksgiving or something, that, you know, people can actually have people over?
Through to Councillor Kunz, yes, that would be within council's purview, given it's a plan amendment and a rezoning. Council could add a condition to provide for more parking if council desire to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martins?
Yep, thank you. And a question, if I can, through the chair to staff. For this particular development, what is the school that this is the catchment area for? The elementary, to start with.
Mr. Richardson, I believe the catchments are determined by the school district, but what is I believe there's a school site just around the corner from here that the school district has had for many years and not constructed a school on. Is that correct?
Correct, Your Worship.
And then presumably the catchments would be determined, but I think Councillor Martin's question is a good one. I'm not sure how you answer it, so I look forward to that, but I think it's important to add that there is a school site secured by the township and the school district, but they have so far chosen for a decade not to build a school there. Do I have that timeline right?
That's correct, Your Worship. So
Yeah.
if you, the cursor here, where the cursor is here, the school district does own this 5-acre site right here where my cursor currently is. And the township owns this site right here as the adjacent park site. So once again, the school district owns this site here, 5 acres. And there, as you mentioned, Your Worship, they're subject to funding from the provincial government with respect to delivering that construction there. And this is the township's adjacent park site that's been secured.
And the park site from the township would be constructed once a timeline from the school district is typically known?
Correct, Your Worship.
Yeah. So township could consider constructing that in advance of the school like it has in other locations. But as of right now, that hasn't been contemplated. But if this development were to be approved and were to proceed, it would be potentially providing residents to the area within 3 years. The township could consider constructing that park before that development is completed.
Certainly, Your Worship, that'd be within council's purview.
And it could add a parking lot potentially to that location as well.
Yes, Your Worship.
Councilor Martins, go ahead. Maybe I don't know if your question was answered. We got a bit sidetracked there, but if you
No,
want to
that's
ask it again about the catchments, I'm not an expert on how they determine them, but I do hear horror stories that parents are driving all over Willoughby to whatever school they're assigned to.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, I appreciate that conversation there. That's helpful information. In the absence of that school being built, do we know how far kids would be transiting to school? Like where the next nearest school is?
I believe it would be Richard Bulpett, Mr. Richardson.
Your Worship, I'm just reviewing the school district comments that we have here. Donna Gabriel Robbins, R.C. Garnett, Peter Ewart, R.E. Mountain.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess where I'm going with that, I believe, I could be wrong, I believe those schools are at capacity. So I guess my question being, is it responsible for us to go ahead with this development until we actually see a school site coming that would service the families that would be moving into this? It's a large development. I mean, even if there was not 509 apartments, like 99 townhomes on their own garner a lot more students. So I guess that's what I'm grappling with on this is we need homes. I agree. We need housing and we need more housing. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to density if it's done right. But the schools are right now, and I understand that's not up to us to build the schools. But should we ignore the fact that there isn't one? And there isn't space for the future residents of this development to go. That's my quandary at the moment, so thank you.
Councilor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And Councillor Martin's sort of asked the question regarding the school site that I had as well, so I appreciate that being brought up. When we look at the report with the actual full site layout, I don't know if that was in one of the slides, but shows the cross-section of 68th Avenue. I noticed that on the south side of 68th, both on east and west side of 207th, there appears to be room for street parking on the collector, but not on the north side of 68th Avenue. Is that because there's some type of special greenway that is built on the north side that is not on the south side that could potentially accommodate more street parking if it was not there?
Through Your Worship, Councillor Pratt, correct.
Okay, thank you. And that greenway on the north side, is that consistent with everything built to the west of 206th Street in its current form? Is there a greenway on the west side of 206th Street along 68th Avenue that's currently built that we're trying to match with?
Sorry, could you repeat the question again, Councillor
For
Pratt?
sure. So if there's a greenway proposed on this section of 68th Avenue, is there a greenway on 68th Avenue west of 206th that we're trying to connect to? Is that the reason why there's a greenway here as opposed to street parking on both sides of 68th Avenue?
So I think you're talking, through Your Worship, to Councillor Pratt, I believe you're talking about this section here.
Correct.
Yeah, so I think it's meant to be a continuation of this through either a greenway or enhanced sidewalk here to the proposed mixed-use center here in the plan.
Okay, thank you. So there is some street parking provided for on the south side of the plan. And I do notice, because I live in southwest of the area myself, so I drive through quite frequently, and I know what you're talking about, blowing through those stop signs, 100%. So looking at this, seeing the roundabouts being put in, will hopefully alleviate some of that concern, and if not, people will learn pretty quick about blowing through something like that. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. So, and people often, you know, if we're going to defer it, it's a moot point for now, but I think people often want to hear how people at this table actually think, as opposed to just platitudes and things like that. So for myself, and I hear what you're saying about it being a residential area, but for me, when I look at the plan being over a decade old, I see it as a continuation of that plan, actually putting in a retail center here. So when we're talking about building a complete community that people don't have to drive around as much, I see this in a positive light. But if there's a way that we can really drill down here on figuring out something to do with parking, notwithstanding the fact that transit on 208th Street will improve as stuff like this gets approved, if it does get approved, you know, those are the things that I'm weighing on this one. So I do appreciate the valid concern of the community here with parking as an issue, with schools as an issue. It's something that absolutely needs to be weighed. So I appreciate the feedback today.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, what kind of demographic are they looking at? Like, how much are these things going to cost? Who are they? You know, it says multifamily, but are these going to be occupied by families, or are they going to be looking at an older crowd, or is there any indication on a big factor is how much they cost and how big are they will appeal to what demographic?
Through your works to Councillor Bailey, these are market townhomes and apartment units. So the market would drive those costs. The market data, I wouldn't want to speculate on what those costs are. There's no specific proposed restriction on the market conditions for those. Some applicants come forward with proposals to have them age restricted or for some sort of specialized housing with a sort of rental cap or item like that, but that's not proposed here, Your Worship.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, and I'm not an expert in this field by any means. Apartments would be more attractive to the families, probably.
Through your worship, Councillor Bailey, valid point depending on price point. Also noting Council's recent determinations with respect to family-friendly housing as well. This project was in before that, but and does have the ability to complete before that. But you're correct in that, and correct in Council's direction that some of the units and some of the FSR proposed here would allow for those larger type units.
Thanks.
Okay, so there are no other speakers. I want to thank everybody for their submission here. There's a couple of procedural challenges that I think council should consider here for a couple of weeks. One is that it is consistent with the neighborhood plan, and there's a significant amount of pressure upon municipalities throughout the province of British Columbia to approve development consistent with the neighborhood plans. That if it's going to be adjusted or changed, then there's some basis to consider changing requirements for all development, not imposing different requirements on one applicant versus another. Now, there's significant pressure on local government to approve housing, as everybody here is, I'm sure, aware. I think it'd be important to look at this one, maybe just spend some more time with the submissions and have council again look at it. I could even see this potentially being deferred until November 4th. There's quite an agenda lining up for October 21st in regards to the provincial government election and requirements of the Township of Langley to approve allowing 4 units on any single family lot, and requirements and mandated densities for towers in multiple locations, potentially in Willowbrook and 200 Street. So I believe there's quite an agenda for the 21st that I don't want this application to get lost in a rather lengthy, demanding agenda where council's facing significant housing mandates with significant implications. I'd like to be focused on that on October 21st. So I'm going to move deferral of third reading until November 4th, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. So I'll open that up. Any discussion on deferral? I think it's appropriate to consider the submissions and see if there can be some work done to maybe potentially look at additional on-street parking and what can be done to potentially address some of these concerns. The challenge being the slope is changing. The slope in Willoughby has been overlooked for a number of years compared to other parts of Willoughby, and I believe that it is going to start to develop and complete. And I think it is maybe appropriate to consider all of the slope with some policy changes potentially rather than a single development. So I think that's for deferral. I think I would definitely want to spend some more time and walk the area as well. So this is on deferral, Councillor Martins. Go ahead. On deferral.
Yeah, and thank you. And I support the deferral. I think it's really important. And then maybe this is a separate motion, but I'm wondering if it's possible for us to somehow receive from the school district before this comes back to us, whether there are any proposed plans in somewhere in the future here in the next 2 to 5 years for that site.
I think I can answer it now, but we can do a second motion after the deferral, which we can certainly take to inquire from the school district if there's an opportunity for us to request a change in their plan. They currently do not have the additional school site on the slope within their 5-year capital plan. It is currently not contemplated to even be requested from the ministry for another 5 years.
Okay, no, thank you.
And we should clarify whether or not that can be changed. So Richardson, I think we'll do a subsequent motion to request clarity from the school district when they intend to proceed with this school.
Certainly, Your Worship.
Okay, so we'll do that after the deferral. Is there any other discussion on deferral? No, seeing none, I'll call the question on deferral of B1 to November 4th. That carries unanimously. Councillor Martins, go ahead. If you wish to request a motion, I could suggest language to the effect of request clarification from the school district on the status of the timeline to construct a necessary school for this Willoughby slope, currently not outlined within the 5-year financial plan. Would that be something like that?
I like all of that. Thank you very much. I'm not comfortable with the last line about currently not in the 5-year plan. In case
go ahead and move your version, Councillor Martins.
No, I like everything you said. Just that last statement cut out.
Did you catch that with everything in the last statement? Councillor Martins doesn't like the last statement. Ms. Bauer, do you have that version without the last statement?
Yes, we simply won't include the 5-year plan.
Yeah, well, I'm not shy about expressing my frustration that the school district is not with the ministry. I have not responded to the growth in Willoughby with sufficient school construction. But however, we'll defer to Councillor Martins wanting to be more diplomatic in this request. So is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on, sorry, I'm going to close that. Is there any discussion on that request for clarification to be, I think, Mr. Richardson, your goal would be to have that to council for the November 4th agenda. Whatever their response may be, you could certainly request a response in time for that. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Worship.
Yeah, great. So is there any other discussion on that request? Nope. Seeing none, I'll call the question on B1, additional motion. Carries unanimously. All right, Mr. Richardson, item B2.
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject official community plan and rural plan amendment application pertains to a 2.17 acre site at 24281 Fraser Highway. The site is designated rural in the official community plan and small farm country estates in the rural plan. This air photo depicts a site located on the north side of Fraser Highway, west of 244th Street. Official Community Plan and Rural Plan Amendment Bylaw 6033 designates the site industrial in the official community plan, permits industrial uses on a site-specific basis in the rural plan, and includes the site in the rural commercial industrial development permit area. Bylaw 6033 is presented subject to one condition listed on page 4 of Council's agenda. Your worship, a total of 292 notices were mailed out, 2 written submissions have been received, and there were 4 individuals noted on the speakers list. Jody Zorb, Monica Zorb, James Van Duzen, and Michael Morelli, your worship.
So we'll start with the speakers list. Do we pronouncing that correctly? Jody Zorb. Please come forward.
My name is Jody. I'm a registered nurse who lives in the Township of Langley and serves the people of the Township of Langley. I strongly oppose the proposed change of the Langley Official Community Plan and Rural Plan designating the lot in question from rural to industrial, as it is a direct concern for the health and safety of our community's resources. Running along the eastern boundary of this property lies a Class B watercourse that within approximately 300 meters directly feeds into a Class A watercourse. By definition, this Class B watercourse provides significant fresh water, food, and nutrient supply to the Class A watercourse, which houses salmonoid and other endangered species of fish. Industrial use of this parcel would directly impact the health of this protected waterway, contaminating the water with chemical, microbiological, and thermal pollution, and sacrificing the oxygen carrying capacity of the water. This parcel of land is part of the Salmon River watershed. This watershed is host to over 20 species of fish, including endangered Salish sucker. This watershed is noted to have one of the last remaining healthy runs of wild steelhead and coho salmon in the Lower Mainland and Fraser Valley. Within this watershed is the Salmon River itself. The Class A and Class B creeks previously noted run directly into the Salmon River approximately 1 kilometer northeast of this property. Water quality significantly impacts salmon distribution and runs, and increasing industrial activity causes irreversible changes to its fragile ecosystem, threatening its complexity and biodiversity. And let's not forget that this land sits upon the Hoppington Aquifer. This aquifer is classified as moderately vulnerable to contamination from ground surface sources and is recognized for potential water shortage by the province of British Columbia. This aquifer serves our community, supporting residents, agriculture, and the natural environment. Expansion of industrial use and development in this area will directly impact the ability of the aquifer to recharge through the natural ground materials. It will also introduce contamination by way of industrial use materials and chemicals that leach byproducts into the ground. This is water from our wells that our families rely on and our children consume. It will also introduce additional draw from the already lowering water table of the aquifer. According to the Ministry of Water, Land, and Air Protection, any further development on top of this aquifer requires careful consideration due to vulnerability of this vital natural resource. There are many more appropriate areas for industrial use in the Township of Langley that are set up with the resources and infrastructure to support such businesses. The area of 244 and Fraser Highway is not one of them. It's a residential community with long-term residents and families, and it has rural land, grazing pastures, and agriculture. Your own city planner opposed this amendment to the OCP, and so do we as residents and participants of this community.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker, Monica Zorb. Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Monica. I'm at 24328 40th Avenue. I am actually quite opposed to this proposal brought before council to change the zoning of the property at 24281 Fraser Highway. The current owner of this property has not been a good neighbor since purchasing the site about 3 or 4 years ago. There's been several bylaw infractions on this property since the current owner took possession. The first thing they did was clear cut the property illegally without a tree removal permit. Bylaw officers attended, collected information, and the case was then forwarded to another township department for investigation and possible fines. As of today, there have been no trees planted on the property to replace the trees that were cut down, and this can be confirmed with the bylaw department. Gravel was then brought in and a parking lot was created. A number of wrecked vehicles were then brought onto the property and stored there. By law, informed the owner that they had to remove the vehicles as the property is designated rural residential and not industrial, and there were potential environmental impacts. Again, this can be confirmed with bylaw. Next, the semi-trucks came with their trailers and started parking on the property. And they would come at all hours of the night and early morning, waking us up due to engine and brake noises. As of today, there is approximately 6 travel trailers parked on the property, and in the past there has been more. Are the owners charging these to store on their property? I don't know, but maybe it's time for bylaw to have another look. It should be noted that there's a property licensed business further down Fraser Highway that stores travel trailers, which is a more appropriate place for these to be. Now the applicant wants to have this property rezoned from rural residential to industrial and does not want to advise the township as to what they want to use the land for once it's potentially rezoned. With the above bylaw infractions that have already occurred, I'm very concerned that there will be future infractions, and this would be a constant source of frustration for the surrounding residents, and it would impact the quality of life of the residents that live in the area. This applicant does not live in the township and does not appear to be invested in the community based on the number of bylaw infractions that have already occurred. The residents that live around this property are invested in the township. We live, work, and shop in the community. The children attend schools in the community, and they attend township facilities for lessons and leisures. On our short street alone, we only have 8 houses on our street. We have 10 kids of varying ages that live on that street. There are residents in the immediate area that have horse farms, blueberry fields, and cattle farms, which are their livelihood. Mr. Mayor, in your 2024 State of Township address, which I listened to, you said the township is unique within Metro Vancouver, and you said we are mostly rural with many wonderful areas protected from development, which we value and cherish just the way they are. This piece of property is part of a community plan that indicates it's rural and small farm country estate, and your own planning department has recommended it not be rezoned to industrial. So I'm asking council to support the township residents that live around the property at 24281 Fraser Highway, and please do not rezone it to industrial, as it will impact your quality of life and potentially impact the environment, including our water supply. Please follow the community plan and your own staff's recommendation and keep industry in the areas where it has already been planned and zoned for. That's it.
Next speaker, and there's no questions from council, and
Okay.
I think council will consider the issue shortly, and I certainly appreciate quoting politicians' comments back to them. I've done that myself many times, and I'll be happy to give those comments more context in this application when council considers it, hopefully shortly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, Jamie Van Dusen, please. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you to the council for allowing me to speak on this issue. My name is Jamie Van Dusen, and I've been an owner of the residential property immediately to the northeast of this small farm's country estate for 8 years. As a neighbor and father to a young family, I'm troubled by this topic of proposal to change the rural property into an industrial one as a shocking development. We're also concerned as to the trajectory of this request. It has skipped the second reading, in which we've only had about 12 days to respond. Furthermore, it's in direct opposition to the report from the Community Development Division that has stated their recommendations for council to not support this decision. It was deemed this proposal was inconsistent with the regional growth strategy, the official community plan, and the rural plan regarding industrial land use. It's also outside of the urban containment boundary that exists to preserve the rural and small town characteristics of our community. This change to industrial designation goes against this principle. In recent history, in 2017, an industrial business in the area proposed a change of its adjoining land from rural to industrial in order to expand their business footprint. It was rejected for similar reasons, in which an entire unified neighborhood spoke out in opposition. In closing, this current proposal only serves to benefit an owner who is not a local resident, and I plead with council to heed the warnings of their own official findings and city planners, and side with the community of concerned constituents who have rallied against this application. Let's keep rural areas for the families that they are designated for, and find a more appropriate place for these industrial developments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please, is Michael Morelli. Michael Morelli here? Nope. Is there any other submissions from the public on item B2? Please come forward. Yep.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm a resident of the City of Langley Township, living in a Yorkson Apartments, and also I was previously living at the Salmon River Uplands. I'm very much aware about the Fraser Highway area. It's a frequent commute for me, and I'm also aware about the owner. First, couple of things that I want to highlight, emphasizing on the fact about that how the property is being managed. First, it's a business property. Second, it's been reported to the City of Langley Township about the environmental services company. So being the case that when any business environmental services, which is a sustainable solution for Langley Township, it is to be evaluated that how they are operating under the business agreements. They are typically to be renewed their business service agreement based upon the services that is provided to the constituency, and as well as how they are operating within the neighborhood. Keeping the neighborhood clean is one of the first agenda of City of Langley Township. Now, secondly, City of Langley Township does have a multiple environment services companies within the City of Langley Township. One adjunction that can be made is that the company be evaluated against the other different environmental service, commercial garbage services, and westland service property which is in City of Langley Township. If there is any particular given point of time, neighborhood is not being kept clean, or neighborhood having any issues with the company or within the surrounding areas, or the contamination level of that company is go above minimum threshold value that has been defined for the environmental issues impact directly within the city's law, then it is to be evaluated against the provincial laws as well. One of the most expected business owner is to be keep a contract and the deliverables through the Langley, which is a concept of commercial services availability. If that commercial service availability is being contaminated around the surrounding areas, then they are to be reminded about that, when they are renewing the permit. It is important that the residents around the surrounding area continue to be evaluating that it can create a hygiene issue as well. Secondly, three things are that has been mentioned about the business, that the business customers, whether they are also rating the company or not, which is the waste disposal and as well as the garbage pickups. So more efficient they are, their deliverables are to be evaluated when the permit is being renewed. Thank you very much for speaking. Thank you very much, Councilmember.
Any other submissions from the public on item B2? Any other submissions from the public on item B2? And for a third and final time, are there any other submissions from the public on item B2? Close the public portion of the public hearing for item B2. Is the proponent here and wish to make a submission? That's no, so we'll close the public hearing for item B2. I'll move consideration of third reading, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Call the question on consideration of third reading of B2. That carries unanimously. And I'll move the recommendation for third read. I'll move consider a third reading of the subject bylaw, seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on third reading? So I am going to also move a deferral as well. But if any member of council has any questions or wants to speak to it, now's the time. Councillor Kunst?
Okay, so because I don't know what the referral, are you making amendments? No.
No, I'm gonna give any questions, time for question. I might have a few comments at the end, and then I'll be moving deferral.
Okay, so, okay, because.
Similar to the last one.
Okay, then I'm good to not comment at the moment.
Yeah, great. Yeah, any other questions or comments? Okay, great. So definitely hear the submissions and hear the concerns. Mr. Richardson, the basis for the lack of staff support, what is the basis for that? There's no policy context to support it. What is the current policy context for this application that resulted in the report to council?
Thank you, Worship. So the subject property is designated rural, going from the higher order to the township policy documents, as you mentioned. So the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy designates the site as rural. That's matched in the township's official community plan. And then in rural areas of the township, we have a rural plan, and the property within that is also designated small farm country estates in the rural plan. So given those policy documents, the staff recommendation was made in accordance with that. So the industrial proposal differs from that. So the resulting staff recommendation was as it is.
Yeah, and confirm for me exactly the new zoning that's proposed and the range of uses available if that zoning were to be approved by the township and Metro Vancouver.
So, Your Worship, at this stage, the application is only for an official community plan amendment.
That's correct.
So right now, in effect, so it would be an official community plan amendment to change the designation of these properties in the official community plan from rural to industrial and from small farm country estates in the rural plan to industrial. That requires a companion regional growth strategy amendment that would also change it from rural to industrial, Your Worship.
And then the range of the designations of industrial designation would allow them to, if again, all approved, would allow the proponent to apply for a rezoning bylaw consistent with the new designation for what range of potential uses?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. The indication from the proponent to date is they've indicated, I think, the range of M1A and M1B type uses potentially, although they haven't made that specific application. Their indication to staff is that to date. Those are a range of light industrial uses. The township has a sort of gradation of industrial uses and accompanying zones in the township. M1A and M1B are typically the light industrial type uses. M2 are general uses, and M3 are heavy industrial uses. So the M1A would be the warehousing, storage, some associated vehicle parking, and those types of, and also associated light manufacturing, Your Worship.
And can you explain maybe some of the submissions around bylaw enforcement? The photo shows a quantity of truck parking that would be in violation of the current zoning bylaw. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Worship. I was noticing that myself. Yeah, would, Your Worship.
Yeah. So what is the, I think it'd be appropriate maybe for council to be provided with that background. If there have been bylaw issues in the past, it's pretty clear from the photo that that's not a rural situation. So I think it's appropriate for that information to be provided. Again, more justification for the deferral. The other line of questioning I wanted to go down is the process for this does require Metro Vancouver approval. Could you outline that as well?
Through the Your Worship, maybe if you just, I can flip to a slide here. I did take an excerpt of the regional growth strategy text here. So as you'll see, 6.3.3, and the item here would be sub-item C, amendment from rural to industrial. So this is a type 2 amendment requiring affirmative 2/3 vote of the board, Your Worship.
Yeah, so my understanding would actually be, yes, it would be type 3 actually, would it not? Because there's a provision in another portion of Metro 2050 that allows for a type 3 amendment for the purposes of industrial. But I will follow up and confirm that with Metro Vancouver, because our understanding at the Metro Vancouver board is that anything for an industrial designation change is a type 3 amendment unless it's significant. But I'll get that confirmed because type 2 amendments have very little chance of proceeding and type 3 have a very high level chance of proceeding. But I think it'd be good to clarify that before council were to consider third reading further.
Understood, Your Worship. Yeah. And as noted in the staff report, that Metro Vancouver process is a subject to condition.
Yeah. So if there's any other, I have a couple other questions here from council. I am going to move deferral. I think looking up another date, I think I'd like to provide some more additional time and really slow this one down. I don't think there's maybe an assumption that there's looking to have this approved. I think it'd be more appropriate to consider that this would be considered, but very slowly and with very in depth and probably not on a single property one-off, but maybe looking at the whole area in the same context that the Fraser Highway Employment Area lands area further to the west of Fraser Highway is being considered, and then sort of look at both processes and the requirements for these areas. I would caution that, of course, not speaking for all of council, but I would caution that the likelihood of this moving forward quickly is very low unless I'm misreading the situation here at the council table. There is no policy context. There's a lot of work that would have to be done to see this move forward. The process further to the west, Mr. Richardson, for the Fraser Highway Employment Lands Area Plan has been years in the making and has probably at least another year to go. I don't know if that's fair to characterize it that way, but there's a tremendous amount of engineering servicing planning, environmental stewardship planning, and other levels of not only township, but also Metro Vancouver reviewing what this area would look like before it's even being considered. I think it would be appropriate that this other area to the east would have a similar process. that makes sense. There's been years of work going into the Fraser Highway Employment Lands area. Is that correct?
Correct, Your Worship, on the years of work and the proposed timeline, and should council want to advance the subject application, that process, as you mentioned, may be an appropriate one to see that within that context, Your Worship.
Yeah, I think that that's appropriate. So I think we can maybe in terms of considering the Fraser Highway Employment Lands Plan area, that other portions of Fraser Highway be considered, but I would say that's very, very focused on the word consider, and look at non-ALR land and Fraser Highway for the long term, but taking to heart the concerns of the residents, but also the concerns for the rural areas in general. But there is I think an underlying policy context, Mr. Richardson, to review continuously non-ALR lands for potential urban uses. Is that a fair statement, or do you think we're a little bit further away from that, maybe for some of these areas of Fraser Highway?
Your Worship, given that the lands are outside of the land reserve, there is that opportunity then to look at them in terms of what may be appropriate uses, given our regional documents and the township's OCP and the balances of residences and employment uses, Your Worship.
All right, so I think there's much more information to get and lots of considerations here. So I think there's no rush. I do have some other concerns from council, and then I think it's appropriate to defer this and then maybe work on a referral or a longer term deferral based on some other criteria that I can put together for council. I'll be moving deferral to November 18th. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I heard that there was illegal gravel dumping on this site. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Bailey, don't have that exact information in hand, but given council's direction, I'll follow up with the information from bylaws well in advance of council's consideration as indicated potentially subsequently.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in finding out more about that. I'm not a big fan of that kind of stuff. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Kunst?
So thanks for that information and that we're going to defer it. I guess my question would be, even with this sort of on the table and even us considering, would this not trigger other property owners to think that they too want to get in on the action of, potentially rezoning their property to industrial? Could we potentially see other property owners wanting to do that because now we are even discussing this? Is that something that we need to think about? It's kind of creating a precedence.
Your Worship to Councillor Kunz, the statutory abilities for each individual landowner to make an application through to council and have that adjudicated by council in terms of those items. I guess as realized along Fraser Highway, we have seen some of those inquiries over time, and council in that situation has indicated an advanced sort of planning process for that, seen in the Fraser Highway Employment Lands Corridor, to sort of see that as a more comprehensive review in that way. So in the context of one, each individual property owner having the ability to make an application, and then council having then the ability to then respond to that application and put it in whatever context they see fit at the time. So I hope that provides info on that.
So potentially we could see more property owners wanting to kind of get in on the action if that's sort of the right.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Kunz, staff see numerous speculative inquiries or less so applications over time is probably a fair characterization of this, of the situation that we run across in our daily work. Not necessarily that one in particular would spur additional ones on here. As noted, the properties to the east are already designated industrial in the regional growth strategy. There's an existing employment generating use there now. There's a context of the Fraser Highway employment lands occurring to the west. So I wouldn't say in particular this one individual site would do that. It's just the nature of the sites one by one as they are reviewed by owners deciding how they want to proceed with their individual sites.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I share that concern. I think it's reasonable and very rational to raise it. If you have non-ALR lands and you have them in a rural area, You just simply say nothing will be considered. However, any council at any point, newly elected, can decide to make it whatever they want. And so I think it's important to always keep that in mind, that as long as it is a non-ALR land being used for other purposes, and as long as it's not approved and planned for and infrastructure provided and environmental requirements put in place similar to the process for the Fraser High employment lands, it'll always be there. At any point, any council can make it a cement plant. And so I think that there's a concern I have in some of these lands that as the township may start to consider employment lands along Fraser Highway that are non-ALR lands for the purposes of employment, for the purposes of tax revenue, for the purposes of economic development, such a shortage of that kind of land that there's going to be continued pressure on any non-ALR land in the township of Langley indefinitely. And it's important to me that it becomes the right thing, not a cement plant. And so I think that that's something that I think is at the core of this, not trying to change the rural areas. So I think it's going to be a long conversation. There's going to be a lot of public input. There's going to be a lot of processes in place. And I think I'm continuing to say that to set the expectation of this proponent and others that we're not headed down the path of a quick approval here. This is going to be a long, long time. And considering how to prevent something like a cement plant and how to have a proper plan in place to not have a one-off from another council. And that's a concern that I've had and that I've seen personally. So I think that's where it's coming from, and I think just vote it down as one possibility. The other is to have a larger look at the whole area and start to see what that might look like, similar to what's happening to the west. And it could very simply end up to the exact place we are today, which that the barrier to approval will continue to be significantly high. I would also recommend or suggest that there's caution to be had because the threshold at Metro Vancouver for industrial conversion is so low. And so that the main board at Metro Vancouver is not a check and balance on this process as it once was under Metro 2040. So I think there's many concerns we have. It's not just about approval. It's not just about, for me anyway, not just about pulling this out of the pile and saying, let's get this done. It's much more about managing what could be a worst case scenario that maybe we won't be here to be a part of. So with that, I'm going to move deferral to November 18th. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on deferral? And that's plenty of time. Mr. Richardson, November 18th gives you plenty of time if there's just to confirm with a memo. I think it'd be important to follow up with council on a memo of the process for a type 2, type 3 amendment and the criteria for those, to have that perfectly clarified, because I may have it wrong as well. So it'd be good to make sure that we have that right, have that provided to council on the 18th as well, if that's possible.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, so we'll double check with the Metro Vancouver staff, as well as I heard the request for the bylaw information as well, Your Worship.
Yeah, great. So we can, if that has to be distributed and closed, then we can put it there to get a history of the site and what it's been used for.
Understood, Your
Okay,
Worship.
great. So with that, any other question about deferral? No, so I'll call the question on deferral to November 18th of B2. That carries unanimously. Get a motion to terminate, moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Bailey. All those in favor, opposed, and that's carried. Thank you. I'm at least consistent.